The insult that shook the stars, the neutral station. Meridian Point floated between three spiral arms of the galaxy, a massive construct of gleaming metal and crystalline domes that housed representatives from over 200 spacefaring civilizations. It was here in the Great Assembly Hall that the fate of entire star systems was decided through negotiation rather than warfare. At least that was the theory. Lieutenant stood at the entrance to the hall, taking in the vast chamber with its tiered seating arrangements designed to accommodate beings of every conceivable physiology. She was not tall by human standards, standing at 5 feet 7 inches, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation military bun and brown eyes that missed nothing. Her Earth Defense Force uniform was simple black fabric with minimal decoration, a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garb worn by most other military representatives. Maya had been selected for this posting not because of her diplomatic skills, though she possessed those in abundance, but because of something else entirely, something that Earth Command hoped would never need to be demonstrated. She was one of 12 humans in the entire species who had completed the Crimson Protocol training program, a classification so secret that even most Earth politicians didn't know it existed. The whispers started the moment she entered the hall. Beings with crystalline bodies chimed softly to each other, their translucent forms catching and refracting the station's artificial sunlight. Gaseous entities swirled in their containment fields, their colors shifting to indicate curiosity and disdain. Four-armed Kelthans clicked their mandibles in what she had learned was their equivalent of dismissive laughter. The humans were still newcomers to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. To civilizations that had been traveling between stars for millennia, humanity was barely more than clever animals who had stumbled upon advanced technology. They didn't know about Earth, not really. The diplomatic corps had been very careful to control that information. Maya made her way to the designated seating area for Earth's delegation, where Ambassador Chen waited with a concerned expression. The elderly diplomat had spent 30 years working to establish humanity's reputation as reasonable, peaceful contributors to galactic society. Everything could be undone in a single moment if things went wrong. Supreme Warlord Krextar of the Vorthan Empire entered the hall like a force of nature. The Vorthans were the military powerhouse of the known galaxy, having conquered or subjugated 43 different species over their 2,000-year expansion. Krextar himself stood 9 feet tall, his scaled hide a deep purple that shifted to red at the edges. 6 eyes arranged in pairs down his elongated skull allowed him perfect peripheral vision. His forearms, each as thick as Maya's torso, ended in hands that could crush steel. The Vorthan delegation took their positions directly across from the human section, a deliberate choice that everyone in the hall recognized as an intimidation tactic. Today's session was supposed to address mining rights in the neutral zone, a region of space rich in rare elements that Earth needed for its expanding fleet. The Vorthans had claimed the entire zone, despite having no presence there, simply because they could. Ambassador Chen stood to address the assembly, his voice calm and measured, as it was translated into 100 different languages by the station's systems. He presented humanity's case with facts and precedent, pointing out that Earth's colony ships had reached the neutral zone first, and that human miners had already established operations on 3 asteroids. Krextar laughed, a sound like grinding stone that needed no translation. The Supreme Warlord rose to his full height, his 6 eyes focusing on Chen with predatory intensity. When he spoke, his words dripped with contempt that the translation system somehow managed to preserve. The hairless apes dare to claim territory in our galaxy. Krextar's voice boomed across the hall. You have existed in space for less time than I have been alive. You have no fleet worthy of the name, no warrior tradition, no strength. You are prey animals who learn to use tools, nothing more. Chen remained diplomatic, though Maya could see the tension in his shoulders. Respectfully, Supreme Warlord, humanity seeks only fair access to unclaimed resources. We have no desire for conflict. Conflict? Krextar stepped down from his platform, his massive form casting shadows across the assembly floor. There can be no conflict between the Vorthan Empire and Earth. Conflict implies that both sides can fight. What you would have is not conflict but extermination. The hall fell silent. Even species that had no love for humanity recognized that Krextar had crossed a line. The Galactic Assembly was meant to be neutral ground, a place where violence was forbidden and disagreements were settled with words. Maya stood up. The movement was smooth and controlled, drawing attention despite its simplicity. She walked past Ambassador Chen, ignoring his whispered warning, and positioned herself directly in Krextar's path. The size difference was almost comical. The top of her head barely reached the middle of his chest. His shadow completely engulfed her. "Supreme Warlord," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics. "You speak of strength and warrior traditions. You call us prey animals. I'm curious what actual combat experience you have against humans." The silence in the hall deepened. Several delegates actually leaned forward in their seats, sensing that something unprecedented was about to happen. Krextar's eyes narrowed, all 6 of them focusing on the small human female before him. "I have killed the champions of 12 species in single combat. I have led fleets that burned entire systems. What experience do I need with your kind? I have seen your broadcasts, your history. You fight each other with primitive weapons over patches of dirt. You are nothing." "Interesting," Maya said calmly. "So you've never actually fought a human. You've just made assumptions based on incomplete information. That seems unusually careless for someone who claims to be a warrior." The purple scales on Krextar's hide began shifting to deep red, a sign of rage that every species in the galaxy recognized. His 4 hands clenched into fists, each one larger than Maya's head. "You dare question my judgment, prey animal?" "I question your ignorance," Maya replied. "You know nothing about Earth, except what we've chosen to show you. You know nothing about human capability, except what you've assumed. And you know nothing about me except that I'm smaller than you." The rage in Krextar's eyes reached a boiling point. In his culture, for a female of an inferior species to speak to him this way was the ultimate insult. His pride, already legendary among the Vorthans, could not tolerate such disrespect. Not in front of the entire Galactic Assembly, his upper right arm moved faster than most beings in the hall could track. The backhand strike was meant to send Maya flying across the room, possibly killing her, but certainly humiliating her and all of humanity by extension. It was a blow that had shattered the skulls of bigger, stronger beings than humans. The impact echoed through the hall like a thunderclap. But Maya didn't fly across the room. She didn't even fall down. Her head snapped to the side from the force, and a thin line of blood appeared at the corner of her mouth, but her feet remained planted. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her head back to face Krextar. When she smiled, her teeth were stained red with her own blood. "Thank you," she said quietly. "According to both Earth law and Galactic Assembly precedent, that constitutes assault with intent to kill. I am now authorized to defend myself with lethal force." She touched a small device on her wrist, speaking a single phrase that would later become famous throughout the galaxy. Crimson Protocol activated. Ambassador Chen closed his eyes and sat back down. He knew what was coming. Earth Command had briefed him on the Crimson Protocol, though he had hoped never to see it implemented. Humanity had learned long ago that in a galaxy full of physically superior species, they needed an edge. That edge wasn't technology or numbers. It was something far more primitive and far more terrifying. It was the calculated application of human lethality, refined over millions of years of evolution, on a world that had tried to kill them every single day. 5 seconds of terror, the Galactic Assembly Hall erupted in chaos as Maya's words echoed through the translation systems. Representatives from dozens of species began talking at once, some calling for security, others demanding clarification of what Crimson Protocol meant. The Vorthans in Krextar's delegation reached for their ceremonial weapons, while the human delegation remained seated, their faces grim but unsurprised. Krextar himself laughed again, the sound now tinged with anticipation rather than mockery. In his mind, the small human had just signed her own death warrant. The assault precedent she cited was real, but it was meant to protect beings from each other, not to give prey animals permission to commit suicide. "You wish to fight me." The Supreme Warlord's voice carried disbelief and amusement in equal measure. "Little creature, I will pull your limbs from your body one at a time. I will show your species what happens when they forget their place in the natural order." Maya began removing her uniform jacket, folding it with military precision, and handing it to a junior officer who had appeared at her side. Underneath, she wore a form-fitting black combat suit that revealed a physique that, while small by galactic standards, showed unusual muscle density and definition. More interesting to the observing aliens were the scars visible on her exposed arms and neck, evidence of violence that seemed at odds with humanity's reputation as peaceful newcomers. The assembly's automated systems began clearing a combat circle in the center of the hall, following ancient protocols that hadn't been used in decades. Fighting in the assembly was not technically illegal, provided both parties consented, and it was classified as a matter of honor. Most civilized species had abandoned such barbaric practices, but the laws remained. While the space was being prepared, something interesting happened. The crystalline Etherians, known for their vast information networks, began rapidly communicating among themselves in frequencies most beings couldn't detect. They had just accessed classified Earth data, information that humanity had tried very hard to keep hidden. Their harmonious forms began resonating with what their species recognized as alarm. "Honored delegates," one Etherian chimed, its voice like breaking glass, "we have just discovered relevant information. Earth is classified in our deep archives as a Category 10 death world." The murmur that went through the assembly was immediate and pronounced. Category 10 was theoretical. No species had ever evolved on a Category 10 world, because the classification meant a planet where the survival rate for unprotected galactic standard organisms was 0. The gravity, atmosphere, radiation, weather, seismic activity, and biological hazards would kill most beings within hours, if not minutes. "Impossible," snarled Vorthan's subcommander Tekval. "No sentient life can evolve on a Category 10 world. The energy requirements for survival would prevent the development of higher intelligence." The Etherian's crystalline form shifted colors, a sign of certainty. "The data is verified. Earth has gravity 40% higher than galactic standard. Its atmosphere contains reactive oxygen that accelerates combustion and oxidation. The planet's surface is 70% covered in a liquid that is universally corrosive. It has weather systems that can generate winds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour. And this does not account for the biological hazards." Maya finished her preparations and walked to the center of the combat circle. Her movements were different now, more fluid, more controlled. Those with knowledge of predator behavior recognized the shift immediately. She was no longer moving like a diplomat or even a soldier. She was moving like something that hunted. "Supreme Warlord," Maya called out, her voice carrying easily. "Before we begin, I should inform you that what you're about to experience is not personal. My actions will be recorded and transmitted to every military institution in the galaxy. Consider this an educational demonstration." Krekstar entered the circle with the confidence of 200 victories. His forearms spread wide, showing off his reach advantage. Each hand could grab and crush, and he had twice as many as his opponent. His scaled hide had turned from purple to deep crimson, a battle coloration that increased his natural armor. His 6 eyes gave him perfect spatial awareness. In every measurable physical category he was superior. "I will make your death quick," he growled, settling into a combat stance that had never failed him. "A mercy your species doesn't deserve." Maya said nothing. She simply stood there, weight balanced on the balls of her feet, arms loose at her sides. Her breathing had slowed to an almost imperceptible rhythm. Her heart rate, monitored by the Assembly's medical scanners, had actually decreased. Several species found this biological response incomprehensible. Most beings experienced elevated stress responses before combat. The human was becoming calmer. The Assembly's arbitration intelligence announced the commencement of combat with a simple tone. What happened next would be analyzed and debated for generations. Krekstar attacked with the same strategy that had won him every previous combat. He used his superior reach and multiple limbs to create an overwhelming offensive, coming at his opponent from multiple angles simultaneously. His upper arms struck high while his lower arms grabbed low, a technique that had allowed him to literally tear opponents in half. Maya moved. To the watching aliens, what happened next seemed impossible. The human didn't dodge backward, away from the attack as every instinct should have demanded. Instead, she stepped forward, into the strike zone, moving through a gap in Krekstar's attack pattern that shouldn't have existed. Her body twisted and flowed like liquid, passing between his grasping hands by millimeters. Her palm strike to his primary nerve cluster was delivered with scientific precision. Humans had studied Vorthan anatomy from every available source, mapping their nervous system, understanding their weaknesses. The strike landed exactly where three major nerve branches converged, sending a shock through Krextar's entire right side. The Supreme Warlord's upper right arm went completely numb, dropping uselessly to his side. Before he could process what had happened, Maya's knee drove upward into his respiratory center, the equivalent of his solar plexus. The force was devastating not because of raw power, but because of perfect targeting. His secondary breathing system, meant to provide oxygen during combat, spasmed and failed. As Krextar gasped and stumbled, Maya's hand found his primary visual nerve, the one that connected all six eyes to his brain. She didn't strike it. She gripped it through the scales of his neck and applied precise pressure. Three of his six eyes immediately lost focus, destroying his spatial awareness. The Supreme Warlord tried to rally, swinging his remaining functional arms in desperate arcs. But Maya was already inside his guard, her body pressed close to his in a way that made his size advantage meaningless. Her elbow found his third nerve cluster, her heel hooked behind what passed for his knee. Her free hand located and compressed the blood vessel that fed his brain. Krextar fell backward, his massive form crashing to the floor with enough force to shake the entire assembly hall. Maya followed him down, maintaining her grip on his visual nerve and blood vessel. Her positioning was perfect, using his own body weight and her skeletal structure to create leverage that multiplied her strength. The Supreme Warlord's remaining functional arms flailed, trying to dislodge the small human who had somehow become an existential threat. But his movements were already becoming sluggish as oxygen deprivation began affecting his cognitive functions. His scaled hide, so effective against energy weapons and bladed instruments, provided no protection against the precise application of pressure to critical biological systems. Maya leaned close to one of his auditory organs, speaking in a whisper that the assembly's systems still managed to pick up and translate. Humans didn't evolve to be the strongest or the fastest. We evolved to be persistent. We evolved to be precise. And we evolved to kill things bigger than ourselves. With a sound like breaking timber, she dislocated his primary neural column, the Vorthan equivalent of a neck. The Supreme Warlord's six eyes widened in shock and then glazed over as his nervous system shut down. His massive body convulsed once and then went completely still. Maya stood slowly, not even breathing hard. A small cut on her lip from the initial strike was the only sign she had been in combat at all. She looked around the absolutely silent assembly hall, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. 5 seconds, she said calmly. That's how long it took to neutralize a being who has conquered 43 species. Not because humans are inherently violent, but because we come from a world where hesitation means death. We learn to identify weakness and exploit it immediately, or we didn't survive to pass on our genes. The silence in the hall was total. Even the ever-whispering gaseous beings had stopped their constant murmuring. They were all processing what they had just witnessed. Their understanding of humanity undergoing a violent recalibration. The ripple effect, the news of Supreme Warlord Krextar's death spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. Within minutes, priority transmissions were burning through quantum communication relays, reaching the farthest colonies and the most isolated outposts. Every military command, every governmental body, every intelligence agency in known space received the same message. A human had killed the galaxy's most feared warrior in 5 seconds. The recordings from the assembly hall were distributed with the news, and they were studied with an intensity usually reserved for first contact protocols. Military analysts from 100 different species watched Maya's movements frame by frame, trying to understand how a being that weighed less than half of Krextar's mass had so completely dominated the encounter. In the assembly hall itself, the immediate aftermath was chaos, carefully controlled by diplomatic protocol. The Vorthan delegation, led by Subcommander Thekvel, had initially moved to attack Maya in retaliation. They stopped when she simply stood her ground waiting, her body language suggesting she was perfectly prepared to demonstrate human lethality as many times as necessary. "Stand down," Ambassador Chen commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had just watched his entire diplomatic strategy evaporate. He turned to address the assembly. Earth regrets that this demonstration was necessary. We came here seeking peaceful coexistence and fair access to resources. We still seek that. But let this be clear. We will not be intimidated, we will not be subjugated, and we will not be treated as prey. The Etherians were the first to formally respond, their crystalline forms harmonizing in what their species used for rapid consensus building. Their spokesperson, a being whose body contained traces of rare elements that made it shimmer like aurora, approached the human delegation. Honored humans, it chimed. We request immediate renegotiation of all treaties between our species. Our previous agreements were made under incomplete information regarding your capabilities. Before Chen could respond, similar requests began flooding in from dozens of delegations. The Kelthans, who had been demanding 70% of human trade revenue, suddenly offered to accept 30%. The Gaseous Collective, which had been restricting human access to their navigation networks, announced full availability with no conditions. Even the militant Razak Federation, which had been massing fleets near human colony borders, sent word that they were withdrawing to their own territory. Maya stood in the center of it all, blood still drying on her lip, watching the Galactic Order reshape itself around the reality of human capability. She felt no satisfaction, only a weary acceptance. This was always going to happen eventually. Humanity had tried to hide its true nature, to present itself as peaceful and harmless, but the galaxy operated on principles of strength and fear. 3 hours later, in a secured conference room aboard the human diplomatic vessel, UES Olive Branch, Maya sat across from Ambassador Chen and the holographic projections of Earth's Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Harrison, a man who had fought in the last wars on Earth before unification, studied her with eyes that had seen too much death. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the general began, your actions have fundamentally altered humanity's position in galactic politics. Was that your intention? My intention was to survive, sir, Maya replied. Krexatar would have killed me if I hadn't acted. The fact that it served as a demonstration was secondary but not unplanned. The Crimson Protocol was meant to be a last resort, Admiral Patel interjected, her projection flickering slightly from the distance. We've spent 50 years building our reputation as reasonable beings. With respect, Admiral, Maya said, we've spent 50 years being treated as inferiors. So every trade deal, every treaty, every interaction has been colored by their assumption that we're weak. Now they know better. Chen rubbed his temples, feeling every one of his 70 years. The Vorthan Empire is in chaos. Krexter had no clear successor, and their tradition demands that whoever claims leadership must prove their strength. Their member species are already declaring independence. That's going to create a power vacuum, General Harrison observed. 43 species suddenly free looking for protection and guidance. And they're all looking at us, Chen added. We've received 17 requests for defensive alliances in the last hour alone. Maya stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the assembly station. Ships were departing in every direction, carrying news and new orders to distant systems. The galaxy was reorganizing itself around a new reality. We need to be careful, she said. Fear is useful, but it's not sustainable. If we become what Krextar was, ruling through intimidation alone, we'll eventually face the same fate. What do you suggest? Chen asked. We use this moment to establish something new. Not an empire based on conquest, but a coalition based on mutual benefit. We've proven we can't be bullied. Now we need to prove we won't become bullies ourselves. The Joint Chiefs exchanged glances through their projections. Finally, General Harrison spoke. Lieutenant Rodriguez, effective immediately, you're promoted to commander. You'll lead our new Diplomatic Security Division. Your mission is to ensure that our diplomats can negotiate from a position of strength without resorting to violence. And if violence becomes necessary, Maya asked, then you ensure it's quick, decisive, and educational, Harrison replied, just as you did today. Over the following weeks, the galaxy watched as humanity handled its newfound power with unexpected restraint. When the Vortan colony of Nexus Prime erupted in civil war, human peacekeepers arrived not as conquerors, but as mediators. When the Kelthans faced a famine due to trade route disruptions, human cargo ships delivered food without demanding payment. But everyone remembered the recording. Everyone remembered 5 seconds. The Razak Federation, known for their aggressive expansion, decided to test human resolve. They sent a fleet to claim a system that Earth had marked for colonization, betting that humans wouldn't risk full-scale war over an uninhabited system. They were wrong. Commander Maya Rodriguez arrived with a single ship, broadcasting on all frequencies. Her message was simple. The Razak fleet has 1 hour to withdraw. This is the only warning. The Razak admiral, confident in his numerical superiority, refused. What happened next became known as the Crimson Hour. Maya's ship, the UES Consequence, deployed something the galaxy had never seen before. Human combat drones operating on swarm logic derived from Earth's most efficient predators. Thousands of small, fast, deadly units that moved like a school of piranha, stripping shields and weapons from the Razak vessels with surgical precision. Not a single Razak was killed, but within 45 minutes their entire fleet was defenseless and drifting. The message was clear. Humans could be reasonable, even merciful. But push them, and they would remind you why their world was classified as Category 10. The New Order 6 months after Krextar's death, the Galactic Assembly reconvened for what historians would later call the Constitutional Convention. The old power structures had collapsed so thoroughly that new ones had to be built from scratch. At the center of it all stood humanity, no longer the newcomers but the kingmakers. Commander Maya Rodriguez entered the assembly hall wearing the new uniform of the Human Defense Initiative. It was still black, still simple, but now it carried a weight that made even the largest being step aside as she passed. Behind her walked a mixed group of humans and aliens, the first graduates of the interspecies combat training program she had established. The hall looked different now. The seating arrangements that had once segregated species by power and prestige had been replaced with a circular configuration. No one sat higher than anyone else. It had been humanity's first demand, and after the Crimson Hour no one had argued. Ambassador Chen, now bearing the title of Earth's first speaker, called the assembly to order. His voice carried the weariness of the past 6 months, but also a determination that had only grown stronger. We gather today not as conquerors and conquered, not as predators and prey, but as equals seeking to build something better than what came before, he began. The old empire is dead. What we build now will determine whether the galaxy moves toward unity or fractures into 1,000 warring states. The remnants of the Vorthan delegation sat quietly in their section. Sub-Commander Thekval had assumed leadership after a brief but brutal succession war. He had surprised everyone by immediately suing for peace with Earth, recognizing that the age of Vorthan supremacy was over. Now he stood to address the assembly, his scales a neutral gray that indicated submission among his species. The Vorthan Empire formally dissolves all claim to conquered territories, Thekval announced. We recognize the sovereignty of all previously subjugated species and request membership in the new Galactic Coalition as a single voice, not as rulers of others. The statement sent ripples through the hall. The Vorthans giving up their empire voluntarily was unprecedented, but Maya knew it was calculated. Better to retain some power as equals than lose everything in a war they couldn't win. One by one, other species stood to declare their intentions. The Etherians offered their information networks for collective use. The Kelthan proposed shared defense agreements. The gaseous collective suggested standardized trade regulations. Each proposal was debated, modified, and eventually integrated into what was becoming the new Galactic Charter. But not everyone was happy with the new order. 3 days into the convention, alarms began screaming through the station. Maya was in a strategy session when her communication implant activated with a priority alert. "Commander, we have a situation," came the voice of Lieutenant Park, her second in command. 17 Vorthan military vessels just dropped out of hyperspace. They're not responding to hails and their weapons are charging. Maya stood immediately. Renegades? Looks like it. Scanner shows Admiral Krexivor in command. He's Krextar's cousin, wasn't happy about the surrender. Maya moved toward the command center, her team falling in behind her. As she walked, she activated her neural link to the UES Consequence, now permanently stationed at the assembly, as a reminder of human capability. The command center was in controlled chaos when she arrived. The main display showed the Vorthan ships arranged in attack formation, their weapon systems painting every vessel near the station as targets. Admiral Krexivor's face appeared on the communication screen, his scales burning the deep red of rage. "I do not recognize the authority of this pathetic gathering," he snarled. "The Vorthan Empire was built on strength, not weakness. We will not bow to prey animals who got lucky once." Ambassador Chen stepped forward. "Admiral, you're outnumbered and outmatched. Stand down before—" "Before what?" Krexvor interrupted. "Before the humans show their true nature. They hide behind words of peace while carrying the biggest stick. They are no different from us, just better at pretending otherwise." Maya moved to the communication console. "Admiral Krexvor, this is Commander Rodriguez. You have one chance to surrender. Your cousin thought he was invincible too. You saw how that ended. You killed him through trickery and surprise," Krexvor spat. "Face our fleet in real combat and see how your species fares." Maya was about to respond when something unexpected happened. The Kelthan delegation stood as one, their insectoid forms clicking in unison. Their representative spoke. "The Kelthan Union stands with Earth. Our fleet is moving to intercept." The Etherians harmonized their agreement. "As do we. Threatening the Assembly threatens all of us." Within moments, ships from a dozen species were moving to defensive positions around the station. For the first time in galactic history, multiple species were uniting not under the banner of conquest, but in mutual defense. Maya smiled coldly. "You see, Admiral, this is the difference between the old way and the new. You ruled through fear alone. We've built something stronger. We've built trust." "Trust?" Krexvor laughed bitterly. "Let's see how much your trust is worth." The Vorthan ships opened fire, but not at the station. They targeted the approaching Allied vessels, trying to create chaos and break the fragile coalition. Energy beams and projectile weapons lit up the space around Meridian Point. Maya didn't hesitate. "Execute Crimson Response Pattern 7. The human fleet, which had been holding position at the edge of the system, jumped directly into the battle using a precise hyperspace technique that most species thought was impossible. 12 human vessels appeared in perfect formation around the Vorthan ships, already firing. But these weren't killing shots. Every strike was precisely calculated to disable, not destroy. Engines were targeted, weapons were neutralized, shields were drained. The human ships moved in perfect coordination, like a single organism with 12 bodies. The battle lasted 8 minutes. When it ended, all 17 Vorthan ships were drifting helplessly, their crews alive but completely defenseless. Admiral Krexivor's face reappeared on the screen, his scales now pale with shock. "How?" he whispered. "Because we learned something on Earth that you never understood," Maya replied. "The most dangerous predator isn't the one that kills everything it sees. It's the one that knows when not to kill. You're alive because we choose to let you live. Your ships are intact because we chose to spare them. This is what real strength looks like." She turned to address the entire assembly, knowing this was being broadcast across the galaxy. "Humanity offers a simple proposition. Join us in building something better, or stand aside. But know this, the age of empire through conquest is over. We've proven we can destroy those who threaten peace. Now we'll prove we can build something worth protecting." The vote was unanimous. Even Admiral Krexivor, defeated and humbled, cast his vote for the new Galactic Coalition Charter. The document established principles that would have been unthinkable under the old empire. Equal representation, shared resources, collective defense, and most importantly, the recognition that strength came not from domination, but from cooperation. As the assembly erupted in celebration, Maya stood quietly at the viewport, looking out at the stars. Lieutenant Park approached and stood beside her, thinking about what comes next. Park asked. "Thinking about how we got here," Maya replied. "Millions of years of evolution on a death world, thousands of years of human conflict, all leading to this moment. We've become the guardians of peace through our capacity for war. Is that irony or destiny?" Maya smiled, touching the small scar on her lip from Krextar's strike. "Maybe both. Earth made us into survivors. Now we're teaching the galaxy that the best way to survive is together." The new order wasn't perfect. There would be challenges, conflicts, and crises in the years to come. But the galaxy had learned the most important lesson. Humans were not to be underestimated. And more importantly, they were not to be feared if you approached them with respect and genuine intent. The Crimson Protocol remained active, a reminder that humanity could and would defend itself and others when necessary. But it was no longer a secret weapon. It was a promise to those who would threaten peace and a reassurance to those who sought it. Commander Maya Rodriguez continued to serve as the head of the Human Defense Initiative for another decade, training mixed species units in human combat techniques adapted for different physiologies. Her students went on to become the backbone of the Coalition Peacekeepers, a force that maintained order without oppression. When she finally retired, the Galactic Assembly commissioned a statue for the station's central plaza. It depicted not the moment of Krextar's death, but the moment after, when Maya stood and offered her hand to help the Vorthan delegation carry their leader's body. The inscription read, "Strength without mercy is tyranny. Mercy without strength is extinction. Balance is survival." The galaxy had learned humanity's secret. They were indeed predators from a death world, shaped by millions of years of unforgiving evolution, but they were also something more. They were builders, dreamers, and protectors. They had looked at the vast, dangerous universe and decided not to conquer it but to make it safer for everyone. And anyone who threatened that vision would learn, as Krextar had learned, that humans could be very, very efficient when they needed to be. 5 seconds had changed everything, but it was what humanity did with the years that followed that truly reshaped the galaxy. They proved that the most dangerous species in known space could also be the most noble, that the apex predator of a Category 10 death world could choose to be the guardian rather than the tyrant. The new order stood on a simple principle. Respect was earned through strength, but leadership was earned through restraint. And humanity, forged in the crucible of Earth, had learned that lesson better than anyone. The legacy of Earth 10 years had passed since the Constitutional Convention, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The Galactic Coalition wasn't just surviving, it was thriving in ways the old empires never had. Trade routes that had been restricted for millennia were now open highways of commerce. Scientific knowledge that species had hoarded as military secrets was being shared in collaborative research stations. And at the heart of it all was the Human Defense Initiative, no longer just a military force, but a symbol of the new order. Commander Maya Rodriguez stood in her office aboard the Coalition flagship Harmony, reviewing reports from across known space. She was 45 now, grey streaking through her dark hair, new scars joining the old ones. Each mark told a story of conflicts prevented or peace enforced. But today's reports brought something new, something that made even her experienced eyes narrow with concern. "Commander, the Void Hunters have returned." Lieutenant Park, now Captain Park and Maya's trusted second-in-command, delivered the news with the gravity it deserved. The Void Hunters were legends, a nomadic warrior species that appeared every few centuries from beyond the galactic rim. They didn't conquer or colonize. They simply fought, testing themselves against whatever civilization seemed strongest before disappearing back into the dark between galaxies. "How many ships?" Maya asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. 300 that we can detect. Their technology has advanced since their last appearance 400 years ago. They're broadcasting a challenge to the Coalition's strongest warrior. Maya stood, walking to the viewport that showed the assembled Coalition fleet. Ships from 30 different species floated in formation, a sight that would have been impossible under the old empire. "They want a champion fight?" "No," Park corrected. "They want a war, but they're offering single combat first. If our champion wins, they'll leave peacefully. If we lose, they'll see it as proof we're weak and attack anyway," Maya finished. She'd studied the Void Hunters extensively. They respected only strength, but unlike the old Vorthan Empire, they didn't care about territory or resources. They lived for the challenge, for the proof that they were the galaxy's apex predators. The emergency session of the Coalition Council convened within the hour. Representatives from every member species appeared either in person or by hologram, their faces showing the strain of this unexpected threat. Ambassador Chen, now in his 80s but still sharp, called for order. "The Void Hunters have issued their challenge," he began. "They want our strongest warrior to face their champion in 7 days. If we refuse, they'll consider it an admission of weakness and attack." The Vorthan representative, surprisingly, was Sub-Commander Thekvel, who had become one of the Coalition's most dedicated supporters. "With respect, this is not a battle any one person can win. The Void Hunters' champion has never been defeated. They wouldn't return unless they were confident. Then we show them something they've never seen before, Maya said, stepping forward. We show them what happens when you challenge not just humanity, but the entire coalition. The Etherian speaker chimed in, its crystalline form pulsing with concern. You intend to face their champion yourself? No, Maya replied. I intend to change the game entirely. The Void Hunters expect us to follow their rules, their traditions. But Earth taught us that when you're facing a stronger predator, you don't fight fair, you fight smart. She outlined her plan, and the Council listened with growing amazement. It wasn't just bold. It was a fundamental reimagining of what strength meant in the galactic community. 4 days later, the Void Hunter champion arrived at the designated combat zone, a massive arena constructed in neutral space between the Coalition fleet and the Void Hunter armada. The champion was everything the legends suggested. 12 feet tall, covered in biometallic armor that seemed to shift and adapt with every movement, 4 arms like the Vortons but faster, stronger, and equipped with weapons that were part technology, part biological evolution. Its name was Apex Prime, and in 800 years of life, it had never lost a battle. The Coalition's response was unprecedented. Instead of sending a single champion, Maya walked into the arena accompanied by 5 others, a Vortan warrior, a Kelthan soldier, an Etherian combat specialist, Sir Gaseous collective enforcer in a hardened containment suit, and a young human named David Chen, Ambassador Chen's grandson, who had graduated at the top of Maya's combat program. Apex Prime's voice echoed through the arena's communication system, a sound like grinding metal mixed with predatory growls. You insult us with multiple fighters? This is not the agreement. Maya activated the arena's broadcast system, ensuring her words reached both fleets. You challenged our strongest warrior. We are strongest together. If you want to face the Coalition's true power, you face all of us. The Void Hunter fleet began powering weapons, interpreting this as a violation of the combat agreement. But Apex Prime raised one of its 4 arms, stopping them. Interesting, it said, its voice carrying something that might have been amusement. You claim your unity is your strength. Then I will break it. The battle began without warning. Apex Prime moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. Its weapons, extending blades that seemed to cut through space itself, whistling through the air where Maya had been standing a microsecond before. But she wasn't there anymore, and neither were her companions. They moved in perfect synchronization, a technique Maya had developed called the Crimson Web. Each fighter covered the other's weaknesses while exploiting their unique strengths. The Kelthan's compound eyes tracked Apex Prime's movements in spectrums humans couldn't see. The Etherian predicted attack patterns using quantum probability calculations. The gaseous enforcer flowed around strikes that would have shattered solid matter. The Vorthan matched the champion's 4-armed combat style. David Chen provided the human element, unpredictability and adaptation, and Maya coordinated them all, her mind linking to theirs through coalition neural implants, creating something that was more than the sum of its parts. Apex Prime was magnificent in its violence. Every move was perfect, every strike potentially lethal. It had trained for centuries, fought thousands of battles, evolved itself into the perfect killing machine. But it had always fought alone, and it had never fought anything like this. When it moved to strike the Etherian, the Vorthan's blade was already there to block. When it tried to overwhelm the human with speed, the gaseous enforcer engulfed its limbs, slowing it for just a fraction of a second, enough time for Maya to strike at a joint in its armor. When it adapted its strategy to counter their teamwork, they adapted faster. David Chen calling out patterns in the seemingly random way that only humans could perceive. The battle raged for 20 minutes, a lifetime in combat between beings of this caliber. The arena's reinforced walls cracked from the impacts. The air itself seemed to burn from the energy discharges. Both fleets watched in stunned silence as 6 coalition fighters held their own against a legend. Then Maya saw it, the opening they'd been creating. Every strike, every dodge, every coordinated movement had been pushing Apex Prime into a specific position. The champion was too skilled to be defeated by any single attack, but it had a weakness: pride. It couldn't conceive of being outsmarted by what it saw as inferior beings working together. Now, Maya commanded through the neural link. All 6 fighters moved simultaneously. The Vorthan and Kelthan struck high, forcing Apex Prime to raise all four arms in defense. The Etherian and gaseous enforcer hit from the sides, preventing lateral movement. David Chen slid low, his blade finding the one spot where Apex Prime's armor had thinned from repeatedly deflecting attacks, and Maya struck with the full force of human lethality, driving an armor-piercing blade, forged from metals found only on Earth, directly through the compromise point David had created. Apex Prime staggered, its perfect combat record broken along with its armor. Dark fluid that might have been blood leaked from the wound. For the first time in 8 centuries, it had been truly hurt. But Maya didn't press the advantage. Instead, she stepped back and offered something unprecedented. You are defeated but not destroyed. The Coalition offers you a choice: leave with your honor intact, or continue fighting and face annihilation. Apex Prime looked at her, then at the others, its multiple eyes showing an emotion the Void Hunters rarely experienced: respect. You fight as one organism with many parts. This is new. This is evolution, Maya replied. The galaxy's next step. Join us and become stronger. Fight us and become extinct. The silence stretched across both fleets. Then Apex Prime did something that shocked everyone who knew Void Hunter culture. It knelt, not in submission but in acknowledgement. We came seeking the galaxy's apex predator, it said. We found something we did not expect. Not a single supreme species, but a collective that fights as one. This is strength we have not seen before. The Void Hunter fleet powered down their weapons. For the first time in their long history, they had found something more interesting than combat, the possibility of belonging to something greater than themselves. Within a year, the Void Hunters had become the Coalition's exploratory vanguard, using their advanced technology and combat skills to scout the dangerous regions beyond the galactic rim. They brought warnings of threats from dark space and opportunities for expansion that would have taken other species centuries to discover. Maya retired 5 years later, not to Earth, but to the Coalition's new training academy built on a space station orbiting a binary star system. There she taught the next generation not just how to fight, but why fighting was sometimes necessary, and when it wasn't. David Chen took her place as head of the Human Defense Initiative, leading with the lessons she had taught him. Strength wasn't about domination, but protection. Power wasn't about control, but responsibility. And humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy wasn't its capacity for violence, but its ability to transform that capacity into a force for unity. The Academy's main hall featured a holographic display of Earth, rotating slowly, showing the dangerous beauty of humanity's homeworld. Beneath it was an inscription in 100 languages. From death's cradle came life's guardians. From humanity's struggle came the galaxy's hope. We are all stronger together than we ever were apart. The Crimson Protocol remained active, but evolved. It was no longer just humanity's last resort, but the Coalition's promise. Swift response to any threat, mercy to any who sought peace, and the demonstrated fact that the most dangerous species in the galaxy had chosen to be its protectors. As Maya stood in the Academy's observation deck on her final day, watching students from 50 different species train together, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a single slap in an assembly hall to a galactic coalition built on mutual respect and shared strength, Earth had made humans into survivors, but humans had chosen to make the galaxy into something worth surviving for. The void between stars was still dangerous, still full of unknowns and threats yet to be discovered. But now it was faced not by individual species struggling alone, but by a united front, with humanity's hard-won lessons as their guide. 5 seconds had started it all. But it was the years of careful building, patient teaching, and deliberate choice that had transformed a moment of violence into an era of peace. The galaxy had learned humanity's greatest secret. They were indeed the children of a death world, but they had chosen to be the authors of life.